Test, 1, 2, 3. Test.
Pick Clay. Ask Clay which end he wants me on. Clay, which end? Which end? Does it matter? Yes. That one? Okay.
Well, that was an easy decision.
There we go. I just do what I'm told, you know?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty hot. Yeah. I think you'll be fine without it. Like, if you project good, it's going to be good. That way I can put them on the thing. You want me to take it off of here so you can stand?
Hello and welcome to the Final Four round of the American Farm Bureau Federation Young Farmers and Ranchers Collegiate Discussion Meet. I am Cora Akama of the AFBF YFNR Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee from the great state of Michigan. I will be serving as room chair for this round. At this time, please turn off your cell phones. Also, please keep distractions as minimal as possible to allow for full concentration for the competitors. In the event of continual distractions, it may be necessary to ask you to leave. Farm Bureau's strength depends on its members' ability to analyze agricultural issues and decide on solutions that best meets their needs. The discussion meet is a competition designed to build these crucial skills in young, active farmers and ranchers. By participating, members build basic discussion skills, develop a keen understanding of important agricultural issues, and explore how groups can pool knowledge to reach consensus and solve problems. The discussion meet is designed to replicate a committee meeting where participants explore a topic and ways to address it. These issues are challenging and complex. The brightest minds in agriculture are still working through solutions to these issues. So, we're not expecting one solution to be presented and selected during this time. Rather, we are expecting these competitors to bring forth varied ideas and potential solutions while working together to ensure the most accurate information is shared to move this issue forward like a typical committee meeting, and we are not expecting judges to fact-check competitors throughout the discussion. Although competitors are expected to use reputable sources when preparing for this competition and demonstrate a strong and factual analysis of the topic, judges are not expected to be experts on the topic discussed and are not in a position to verify if the information is factual or not. Rather, judges are evaluating based on a rubric with the following sections: opening statement, analysis of topic or problem, problem solving and implementation, cooperative attitude, delivery, and closing statement. Serving as the moderator for this round is Rachel Duncan of Louisiana. Serving as timekeeper for this round is Scott Sweeterman of Kansas. The final 4 competitors were determined through 3 rigorous rounds of competition. The tabulation of rankings from round 1 and 2 were used to determine the top 16 competitors who competed in the Sweet 16 round this morning. The winner of each Sweet 16 discussion has advanced to this final round. The judges, timekeeper, and competitors have been briefed as to the rules of the competition. I yield control of this competition to your moderator, Rachel Duncan.
Thank you, Cora. We appreciate all of you taking the time to attend this competition. Remember, you are not allowed to bring up any prepared notes and/or electronic devices such as smartwatches and cell phones. Competitors, please come forward and take your position at the discussion table. Now that all competitors have been seated, writing is allowed. As our room chair has mentioned, the competitors have been briefed about the competition, and their general discussion should be directed towards each other. In my role as moderator, I will not attempt to control or direct this discussion. Remember, the discussion is meant to resemble a committee meeting, with the end goal of determining possible solutions to the question at hand. This models the grassroots policy development process, and some statements may not reflect approved AFBF policy. This is not a panel discussion with an active moderator. As such, I will not intervene unless I need to do so, or until disparaging or inappropriate remarks are made. Therefore, competitors should moderate and conduct themselves in a cooperative manner. The question for this round is, urban sprawl presents significant challenges for farmers and ranchers, impacting access to land and resources. We see that 1.9 million acres of agriculture land are lost to development each year. How can Farm Bureau help promote responsible growth in communities while mitigating the loss of farms, ranches, and that way of life? The competitors for this round are Tori Reed, Sarah Blair, Courtney Tabby, and Brooke Beamistiffer. We will begin the discussion with 30-second opening statements from each competitor. Following the opening statements, there will be 30 minutes of open discussion, followed by 1 minute of quiet time for the competitors to prepare their 1-minute closing statement. Official time is kept by the timekeeper, and I will call time at the conclusion of each period. Competitors, in voluntary order, make your 30-second opening statements. Please stand and direct your opening statements to the audience. The timekeeper will indicate when your 30 seconds have elapsed by holding up a red card. You may begin.
Imagine this. Right now, somewhere in America, farmland is being turned into subdivisions and paved roads. Once this farmland is turned into these things, it will never return back to farmland. This question is not about stopping growth within our communities, but it is about how Farm Bureau can help our communities grow responsibly to protect the agrarian way of life.
I remember my first time when urbanization hit me like a truck. I was sitting in the back of a town council meeting listening to this couple discuss how they were selling their farmland to a solar company directing energy directly to New York City. With a population expected to reach 375 million people by the year 2050, urbanization is not an issue that's going anywhere. But with support and understanding from our communities, we can direct urbanization into areas that are already urbanized in order to help support agricultural land and the agrarian way of life.
Time.
I never thought that I would share my maiden name with a subdivision, but due to urban sprawl in my hometown, that's now the case. Today, I look forward to discussing how we can connect farmers in developing areas with opportunities such as direct-to-consumer sales to keep them profitable, and what policies Farm Bureau can support to protect ag land and give farmers options other than selling out to fund their retirement.
Throughout our nation, farmland is lost at an alarming rate, all while farmers struggle to either acquire more land to expand their operation or simply enter the industry. Through supporting greater representation in local township meetings and strengthening farmland preservation programs, we can stay engaged in the decision-making process. This will enable Farm Bureau to continue to shape development that supports economic progress without sacrificing valuable land.
You have heard the opening statements. Competitors, please direct your discussion to your fellow panel members now.
So I would love to start this conversation out by just understanding better what urban sprawl looks like in each of y'all's states. I think we're pretty diverse. I know I'm neighbors with New York, but then we got Georgia and we got Utah, and I already know that urban sprawl is going to look different in these areas. And I think before we talk about more problems or even solutions, we need to understand what urban sprawl looks like in different places. I know for Pennsylvania, our most recent statistic is that 1,200 square miles are lost to development annually, and this is mainly through data centers and housing developments, sometimes even solar farms. And I think this is really important to bring attention to because not only is this hurting farmers' livelihoods, I also see it as a national security issue. Our farmers provide our food, and as we know, everybody eats food, and we don't want to rely on other nations to supply our supply chains. That makes us so vulnerable. So it's really important that we are continuing to preserve this farmland so that we can continue to have strong supply chains. And before I get into the weeds of that, I'm curious to know each of your states what exactly urban sprawl looks like for y'all.
So I can speak for Georgia. I know we're in the South, but we are seeing urban sprawl. Atlanta is a huge metro city, and it seems the metro is just spreading north and south into our farmlands. Thankfully, in my own community, we have been able to lean into agritourism and really go off of agritourism to not only grow responsibly, but to, instead of bringing them directly into our infrastructure and having to make infrastructure within our school systems and roads and more houses to support these people, they're able to go back home. So they're able to still live in those metro areas, but come see us, see the agritourism, really make that connection. So although, we are seeing that urban sprawl, I'm so thankful to be a part of a State Farm Bureau who creates programs to increase agritourism and to really benefit from that, and I can go into that later.
Yeah.
But in Georgia, we definitely are seeing urban sprawl, and it's just becoming more and more of an issue.
Yeah, to add my perspective as someone from Utah, Utah's an area that's growing really quickly, and this is an issue that hits really close to home. Courtney, you mentioned solar panels, so along with that subdivision that's on my great aunt's land, some of the other property that my family's rent our cattle on just went under contract to be developed for solar panels. In Utah, we've lost 20% of our farmland since the 1960s to urban sprawl, and it really is a very scary thing, and that's something I'm seeing with our farmers is that loss of hope. It's starting to feel really dire for a lot of people because it seems like it's coming in everywhere within, across the center of our state. And I've actually seen something very similar to you, Tori, where we need to focus on changing what we're doing. And agritourism's part of that, direct-to-consumer sales is part of that, and helping our farmers adapt to that. I had the opportunity to talk to our State Farm Bureau Vice President who he showed me a picture of his farm, and it's literally a couple of fields surrounding by subdivisions. And he said he had to have this mindset shift of these aren't enemies, they're customers. You know, the question at hand doesn't say how can we stop growth, it says how can we promote responsible growth. And it doesn't say how can we mitigate farm loss or how can we stop farm loss, it's how can we mitigate farm loss. Courtney, I'd love to hear what things look like in your state and kind of some issues and maybe potential leads we can find.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously I'm from New York, I'm from upstate, so thankfully not necessarily right in the city where we're seeing a lot of urban sprawl, obviously, but I'm from the Hudson Valley, which means that I'm kind of smack dab in between our state's capital and New York City. From that, we are also seeing a lot of agritourism, which is such an exciting concept. And to speak a little bit to what you were saying about sort of those aren't enemies, but those are customers. I think that's such a powerful thing to be thinking about when we're talking about urban sprawl and we're talking about the growing population, to be able to recognize that these people are the mouths that we're feeding, and sort of a I scratch my back, you scratch yours sort of situation where we can really work to make sure that we're integrating that partnership. I think what agritourism comes back to is education. Understanding that educational standpoint in our local communities, but also in these urbanized areas that might not understand why agriculture and farmland is so important and how that directly affects them as a consumer. So I think when we're talking about New York State especially, like bringing in agritourism, I've seen it so much in my county, in my area especially, but we are seeing a lot of urbanization, especially creeping up from New York City, as well as just a lot of our central city locations.
So something that Georgia does specifically on the agritourism network, through Georgia Farm Bureau, they created a certified farm market program. Within that program, you know, each certified farm market, you have to grow over 20% of your own produce at home. And within that program, there is signage. There's also what we call a farm passport. That farm passport, not only does it allow people from out of state who come into these markets to see the agritourism market that is in Georgia, but it also allows for your local community. So there is 9 agritourism spots that are a part of this farm passport program in my own hometown. Now that's just in one county. There's over 100 farm markets across the state. So not only is that helping within my own county bring different people everywhere and promoting that sales tax. So, you know, something to think about when we're talking about growing responsibly is the money for growth has to come from somewhere.
Right.
You know, where is the money coming from? Well, in my own community, we've been able to leverage agritourism through sales tax. Again, we're not supporting the infrastructure of everybody that comes in because we're not having to. They're going back to the metro areas. But we are able to use the sales tax to increase and to take care of our roads. We're able to take care of, you know, the areas that make the city beautiful because they're buying gas from us. They are supporting the local restaurants because they're in the community, not just making one stop. So that is something that Georgia Farm Bureau does that I would love to see in other states and that we could change to a local level. You know, locally, we could make our own passports to leverage our locals and to allow our locals, especially in the city areas, to see the agritourism that's even in their own city. Again, in order for us to continue having these customers, they have to make that one-on-one connection.
And I also
I think you guys all really answered the question great. I love how we're talking about, I think even a potential solution already with diversification, specifically with you, Tori, and Sarah, talking about agritourism a lot. And I think the problem a lot of times boils down to, we need to make sure as Farm Bureau that we are supporting things that continues to make farming profitable and lucrative, so that when that data center or other forms of development knock on that farmer's door with this high $1 million value, they are not as likely to give in because they know that they can rely on their current occupation of farming to be profitable. So I really love that you're bringing up diversification, and a lot of that is through agritourism, and that also touches on part of the problem, which is the agrarian way of life. By sharing your farm and your story with the public, they're able to have a greater sense of respect for their farmers. They're going to want to support them more, and we're able to preserve those lifestyles and traditions and values without them being kind of compromised by everyone wanting to live in the country. I think too, as we're kind of starting to talk a little bit about solutions here, I think a big part of this, and especially as Farm Bureau, as we consider ourselves advocates, is that we need to make sure at a grassroots level, at the county levels, at the township levels, we're having representation in our township meetings, because that is where the problem kind of flourishes, because the zoning needs to change in order for the development to happen. And who are we to say as Farm Bureau that this is wrong or that's wrong or we should do this if you're not there and understanding what's actually happening to you locally at the local level? So I think we really need to have our boots on the ground, as we talked about earlier, and encourage our members to be there. And we can even inflict policy and have policy that supports every township should have an agricultural chair. I know in my township, I'm very fortunate. I come from a rural community. My dad serves on the planning commission and probably 3 other farmers. But then more urban areas like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, there's no farmers out there. So maybe putting that into action of saying we need an ag chair, and if there's not, using our field staff to ensure like this area is really susceptible to development. We need to make sure somebody's at that zoning meeting. And a lot of times that is expressed through local newsletters. It's in the newspaper and people receive letters. So we need to be at those meetings.
I really would love, sorry, I just want to jump in and tie in actually some of Tori's points and your points together. I completely agree. One of Farm Bureau's things that they really promote is our members getting involved locally. I know a farmer in Utah who was able to serve on his local planning and zoning board, and he actually was able to help pass some codes that protected people trying to do agritourism, because that's something we've run into in Utah is, growing agritourism, but then there's all this liability that comes with that. And so we were able to, number one, have someone with that ag perspective in that place, in that seat, so there's that aspect of it, and then also promote policy that's protecting our agriculturalists as well as promoting that responsible growth. Courtney, I know you've got some thoughts on this, so I want to pass this over to you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we're also, as we're talking about building up this community support and developing and having people in those town meetings, I know I've had personal experience being in the back of that town meeting and just feeling so powerless, right? Feeling like I can't take the stand to be able to do something because this is just all happening right before my eyes, right? I think we also have to ensure that we're not bearing that weight on the farmer. As we talked about in earlier discussions, succession planning is something that's really, really important as we're talking about sort of that exchange of farmland. And if there's someone that lacks a succession plan, like the family that I talked about earlier, it's really hard for them not to want to sell out to someone that is offering them essentially a retirement plan to be able to put solar on their fields or whatever that may look like, to be able to sort of have that comfort and have that ability to then step away from the farm and still have a source of income. So I think when we're talking about solutions, it's really, really important that we remember that we shouldn't be putting the weight of that on the farmer. It should never be a judgment call. It should never be a place where we can really step in to sort of make that judgment call. And I know you briefly sort of touched on that and discussed on that, which I really appreciated. But as we're sort of thinking about that, what are some ways in which we think we can sort of alleviate the weight off of the farmer making those decisions and help to support that pathway?
So Courtney, I love that you have just mentioned that. I think we've highlighted 2 different avenues that we could go to kind of bringing a solution to the table. Number one, Young Farmers and Ranchers, let's think about what this organization is. It's a leadership organization more than anything. So as Young Farmers and Ranchers, what if we provided the education to our local members to be able to sit on our zoning boards and sit on our zoning committees and have a stand? If they're on these zoning boards, if they're on our zoning committees within our local towns, then they are able to say, before we go ahead and build these houses on this land, what if instead we put a farm stand? What if instead we allowed this farmer to occupy this space and sell their local produce direct to consumer? So again, we're bringing in people, even if it's our local communities. But if we step back and we educate like Farm Bureau does so well, and we educate our local levels to be able to sit on these zoning committees, then that would be huge. Also at the state level, there is tons of commodity groups. So when we look at that, every commodity group, especially within Georgia, is able to specialize and help every farmer that's a part of that commodity really make great decisions. Okay, what if we had an advisory board or a committee that was just through zoning? So that way, your state could be on the same page. You wouldn't have the metro area making a completely different decision that will eventually spread out and affect the rural area. So if you had a group that specialized in zoning and specialized in teaching your local farm bureaus how to take part in their own zoning and create a succession of knowledge and allowed everyone to be on the same page about how we as Farm Bureau grow the state in a responsible way. Again, we're not saying to stop growth. Growth is inevitable. So how do we do it responsibly? That's just my idea. I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
I love your point, Tori, and I love too that you're saying not all development is bad, and I think that's really important to take away here because we're talking about rural decline. Some development is good because it's supporting these rural economies. We need roads, we need infrastructure, so people stay there and our farmers can continue to thrive. And I love too that you brought up education, and specifically educating our Farm Bureau members on how they can act in these zoning meetings, and I think a great opportunity through that is through a platform we already have called Farm Bureau University. We can add a module that's specifically for how do you interact in your local township meetings, points to bring up, points to make your point stronger as a whole. And I also want to go back to Courtney. You made a point a little bit, and I want to make sure we shed light on that. Is how do we take a little bit of the weight right off of the farmer so they don't feel like it all falls on them to go to this meeting, and if they don't say the right thing, the zoning might change. And I want to bring something up that's worked great in Pennsylvania. We have a great farmland preservation program. This is actually a state program, but I think as Farm Bureau, we can encourage other states to adopt it. Pennsylvania is actually the #1 state for the most farms and the most acreage. We have 650,000 officially preserved acres, and we actually had Brooke Rollins, the Secretary of Ag. She attended, she came to a farm in my home county, Lebanon County in Pennsylvania, to help celebrate this achievement and further support it. And a little bit about farmland preservation. I don't want to get into the weeds of the application process, but essentially it ensures that the zoning of that property stays agriculture. I know you brought up succession planning. Sometimes there's not a next generation to take it over, unfortunately, but at least you're ensuring that ag land stays ag land, especially if we're doing 1, 2, or 3 class soils. That's prime farmland, and we don't want to lose that to development. So I think this has been a great program. Not only does it ensure that it won't be developed, but it also provides our farmers with additional financial incentive. And I know you said through agritourism and diversification, that's important, in sales taxes, that we're continue to support our farmers. This is another way. When a farmer successfully completes their application for farmland preservation, they're paid a high dollar amount for that. Well, not always high dollar, but they're getting something back from that, and that's helping them invest in their property. And I just want to give one local example. In Franklin County, unfortunately, a data center wanted to come in. They were offering him $15 million, and he was able, for anyone, that's a lot to turn down, but it was a little easier for him to turn down because instead he invested his property in farmland preservation, and he had a turnaround of $2 million. So I think, first of all, that's something really noble to look at, and I think it just sheds light on how successful farmland preservation has been in our states, and I really think it can help yours as well.
So Georgia has a very similar program, and honestly, we may have went off of, kind of piggybacked off of Pennsylvania on that, but it's the Georgia Conservation and Farmland Trust.
Okay.
And this trust, actually, Farm Bureau was able to push it through on our state congressional level. So they were able to lobby for it and get it passed. Now, actually, because again, the whole question is, what can Farm Bureau do? And our Farm Bureau president through our state actually sits on the advisory board of this trust. So that, again, is another way that your state Farm Bureau can take a part in that trust. Not only can they get it passed through our amazing lobbyists, but they can also take a stand legally and be on that advisory board to ensure that this growth is happening responsibly, because we all know some ag land can be developed. You know, it's to a point that development is possible, but we also have to ensure that that development is not wasted.
Right. Absolutely. And I love that you talked a little bit about our representation and our lobbyists. I think they're such an underutilized resource. I know, just talking back and pivoting back to some random statistics, in New York, 90% of our land is rural, right? So we have a huge mass of rural land, but only 20% of our representation comes from rural areas. So what that looks like is we have people that don't necessarily understand the agrarian way of life that are representing us on a state and national level. So I love that we're sort of talking about education, and that's been something that's been really bobbled around among all of us, and I'm so excited to continue developing that idea. But can we create a way to sort of develop education for our representatives, especially those coming from those urban areas? What can we as Farm Bureau members do to really develop that? And I think that looks like creating workshops. We have such phenomenal representation and such phenomenal relationships with a lot of the people that do represent us. So I think utilizing and leveraging Farm Bureau's connections and relationships can really continue to develop. Sarah, do you have any ideas from Utah and sort of building on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, something that Utah's done in recent years. So every few years, we'll do what's called a tour of Utah, where we take our YF&R members on a tour throughout the state to look at agriculture, and they've actually worked on getting representatives from the state level involved. So you'll have a senator or a representative come with us to these farms, and the farmers can talk to them and they can show them, this is what this looks like. And that's something I've really seen with, the benefit of having that connection between urbanization and farms is it gets the people closer to the farms. Yeah. And Farm Bureau, with so many of the things that we've mentioned, is in such a unique spot. They're in a unique spot to train people to be able to talk to these people, to be on those zoning councils, because I know a lot of agricultural groups that do awesome things, but Farm Bureau is by far the leader when it comes to teaching people how to deal with policy, how to deal with leadership. And so focusing on that, and then also those education opportunities. There's been a big push in Utah to teach people how to teach people about their farms. So I think it was last week, our state held its very first ever promotion and engagement conference where they actually took farmers and ranchers and they showed them, here's how you take pictures to look good on social media and share, and this is how, you can kind of do on-farm education. One of the farmers that helped host that, they have a group called Heber Valley Cheese, and I actually got to talk with him. They are in an area that's really, really struggling with urbanization, and he said the thing that saved their farm is Farm Bureau helped connect them to an extension resource where they had their family dairy, and they learned how to make artisanal cheeses. So they live in a very affluent area that's taking over, and now they can market that artisanal cheese to these people. So it's really cool to see how Farm Bureau is at the center of all of these different ideas that we've mentioned. And kind of moving forward, I'd love to see kind of what this could look like on the local level. We've talked about the state level, but zoning and all these different things look so different in each community. Yes. Brooke, what do you think we can do to kind of, utilize county farm bureaus to really make sure that we're meeting people's needs in a very specific way with this?
Right. I'm glad you brought up the local level. Again, we talk again and again and again. Farm Bureau is a grassroots organization. I'm going to dote on my one solution, which was, I think locally, first and foremost, we need to be at those zoning meetings, so then we know that kind of positions our further action and where we need to place our focus. I'm really glad, too, that you brought on the public perception. And I think as Farm Bureau, all of us have a place in promoting ag. And I know you said about teaching farmers how to tell their story. We're Farm Bureau members, we're part of agriculture, we all have a story to tell. Everyone has social media these days. I know all four of us sure as heck do. So taking that as an opportunity to share your story. It doesn't matter if you come from an ag background, heck, share what you're doing here at Farm Bureau and why we're promoting this. So I think on a local level, that's not always local, because I think we talk about social media, it can reach all these actually global platforms, but also you have local people following you, and then when you're sharing your story, that's your local story, and sharing why you should come to my farm, why you should purchase produce from a local produce stand, like you said, with all the benefits with that. I went to this agritourism farm today, I had so much fun. And when we get the public to support this more, and that's also our public officials, and there's just a greater understanding of that agrarian way of life, we're gonna have a greater sense of support, and people might not want to develop it as much because they're understanding what they're sacrificing.
Yeah. We're a grassroots organization. We've all said it and we all believe in it, If we weren't a grassroots organization, we would not have gotten this far. Farm Bureau is an education platform. It's an ag advocacy platform. And we have these resources. So if our state and our national Farm Bureau is able to push it to the local level, if our state officials are able to locally educate our local officials to then push that knowledge out further, that would be a great way. And again, I really do feel like it does start on the local level. So we can take all this information we've learned at this conference back to our local Farm Bureau. Then our local Farm Bureau can push out programs like farm passport programs. Again, ag tourism is huge in my community. So, and when we look at ag tourism, for us, that may be how we are able to advocate for ourselves, because we're able to bring in those people. But that might look different in the county beside us, because the county beside us, they may be more of a metro Atlanta area. And in the metro Atlanta area, yes, they can use ag tourism, but they can also utilize their spaces more. So I really do feel like it's going to rely on our local organizations to educate in ways that they are best able to utilize their agriculture and their space, because we're all growing. It's just how can we grow best?
And I think a common thread that we've really all just talked about is this topic of education, right? Whether that looks like doing it through being present at those zoning board meetings or being present at those town hall meetings, or really doing it as we're talking about agritourism, right? All of these opportunities for education and continuing that education is so key and so vital. And as we're looking at the younger generation, I think also sort of bringing an FFA on this as we're talking about agricultural education and the importance of that, not only as professionals and as young ag professionals, but also in the classroom, right? How are we continuing to develop the understanding of the general public as we move up through the generations? Do you guys think there's any way we can sort of bring in FFA as a sort of Farm Bureau FFA connection sort of thing?
Yes. In Utah, we've been working really hard on involving FFA. We've started doing an FFA discussion meet. Ag in the classroom is something that we're super big on in Utah. I don't like to brag, but we have a really stellar, Utah houses the National Center for Ag Literacy, which has been really useful. And so I think that piece of it is very important. One thing I've seen with like ag education, getting into, schools, communities, and then again with ag tourism, is it helps people see agriculture as a beloved part of their community. I have a distant family member, they've got a farm that they do some ag tourism and they do education, and they're getting pretty boxed in, but I'm pretty sure if someone came in and threatened to develop that farm, there would be a riot in that community, because so many kids have such good memories going there and doing a story time where they learn about apples and then they can get to go actually pick that. I really love that we've focused so much on education, and I think it's key that we couple education with action, and that's a lot of what we focused on, because that's one thing I've seen is people are kind of frozen in fear when it comes to urban sprawl. It's really intimidating, and there's a lot of people that have kind of just accepted what they feel is inevitable, and so I think that's really important, is focusing on that action piece, the action piece of actually who is going to go be on this board, who is going to be the one that's educating this, and who's the one that's going to be starting these agritourism things. And so I think, what are some ideas of how we can kind of spark that interest and that action in our Farm Bureau members? Tori, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, so the education piece is near and dear to my heart, because although I'm a senior in college, I'm finishing my education degree, and I'm actually a kindergarten teacher. So we took our kindergartners to an apple house, and you would be shocked at the amount of kindergartners who had never picked their own apple. So again, that's why education is so near and dear to my heart, but we need to be educating not just these kids. It does have to come as a whole piece. So, we only have 5 minutes remaining, so I do want to acknowledge that as well, but we have got to have people that have the knowledge go to our local communities and say, we all know you want to be on these zoning committees, but let's do it correctly. Again, Farm Bureau is a leadership organization who does trainings at all of these conventions. Why can't they come to our counties? So let's have them come to our counties and host these training sessions, if it's for young farmers or if it's for our older community members who are retired and who want to take a stand in their community because they're tired of seeing urban sprawl take over and agriculture be pushed out. So if Farm Bureau came in and they led these sessions on how you can apply and run, because we all know it looks different in every state and every community. Georgia, thankfully, it's constitutionally protected through our constitutional rights that we are able to zone through our own counties, and it's not state mandated. So again, thankful to Georgia for that. But in your own state, it might look a little different. But if someone came in from the state level, trained some of these local members, similar to the PALS program. We could take the PALS program to a smaller level and really focus on how do we train these individuals to go onto these zoning committees and make a true impact within the county.
I love that we're talking about action now, especially with less than 5 minutes left, because we really want to implement. We have so many great ideas here today. Diversification in ag to make ag more profitable, and then attending those zoning meetings so that we have a say before the change is inflicted, and then utilizing Farm Bureau resources like the Farm Bureau Academy, and also just workshops with our local chapters to educate people on how they can take action. And like we said, urban sprawl looks different in every state, so it's so important to have multifaceted solutions. I know we always talk about there's not one solution, so I think these are different ways to take action. I'm really curious, before we end here today, as far as when we talk about policy, what are maybe some specific policies? I know, Courtney, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. What is one or two specific policies for all these different solutions we talked about that Farm Bureau can advocate for to further sustain this action?
I think continuing to develop the Right to Farm Act in a lot of our local communities. I know in New York, again, like as we've sort of discussed, only 7 of our counties actually have a Right to Farm Act, and that's done on a county-by-county basis. So maybe really continuing to develop the Right to Farm Act in each of our counties. And then I know it was also brought up about agritourism and sort of the legislation that has to go alongside that, the insurance policies that have to go alongside that, and the cost that really takes on farmers to just be able to educate about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So maybe really sort of focusing lenses and policies on not only developing the Right to Farm Acts in a lot more counties, I know in New York especially, but I'm sure in your guys' states as well, we can continue to develop that. And also really supporting that agritourism, supporting the insurance policies, whether that's a grant program to support the development of that business or whatever that may look like, just really getting out that educational portion, I think is so important to our community members, to our lobbyists, and even to our legislators. Bring them out on the farm, show them what we're doing. And I know, Sarah, you talked a lot about that, which is why I'm looking at you as you say that. Do you have anything to add on that sort of concept?
Yeah, so in Utah, and I know there's other states that have this, we have what's called agricultural protection areas. And it's something that's done on the county level, and it's really similar. It reinforces a lot of those Right to Farm Acts. So if you apply and you get your land put into an agricultural protection area, you're protected against nuisance laws, all sorts of things. And recently I've seen county farm bureaus and state farm bureaus really working to cater these programs to work for their people. So I knew someone in Utah County where there's a lot of really small farms, and the minimum parcel size to be an APA was 40 acres, and she only had 20 acres, so she got it changed so that she could do a joint APA with her neighbors, so that they could get together, and if together they had 40 acres, then they could apply. And the really cool thing about that is, in order for that land to ever be rezoned to non-agricultural use, every single one of those joint APA members has to sign off on that. So there's so many different policies that Farm Bureau.
Time has been called. Please prepare your closing statements. I ask that the audience remain silent for 1 minute to aid the competitors in their preparation. Time. Please put down your pencils, and in voluntary order, please stand and share your 1 minute closing statement.
Urban sprawl is something we're experiencing at local and national levels. It affects all of us. At a local level, it's near and dear to my heart as I want to take over my family farm one day, and I have to consider how that may impact me. But at a national level, we talk about it as a national security issue, as we don't want to be relying on other nations to supply our supply chains with food. And I think going back home today and back to our states, a main solution is having greater representation in our zoning boards and also strengthening farmland preservation. I know, Georgia, you talked about similar programs, and also Sarah in Utah, you have a similar program. And I think a lot of things that supported this overall consensus was more education from Courtney, and then Tori and Sarah, also just greater diversification so our farming can continue to be profitable, so they're saying no to that development. Overall, a great and super successful conversation here today, and I'm excited for the future and further protecting our farmland.
I think it's easy to recognize that we all need agriculture. Agriculture is truly the backbone of America. But within that backbone of America, we all come from towns and communities. Communities that we build with agriculturalists and non-agriculturalists alike. I think as we're developing a lot of our ideas today, things like agritourism, things like building that educational component, and things like really developing how we can be present on zoning boards and not only have that educational component, but also take action in that education, were all phenomenal topics of discussion. I know I am truly excited to go back to my local community and look into how we can really develop agritourism in our area and also continue to educate people who might not quite understand what we do and the agrarian way of life. I'm excited to see as we continue to grow in this development and conversation.
There may now be a Wynn Ridge subdivision, but there's also still Wynn Ranch. Today's discussion was an amazing focus on the challenges that farmers in urban areas are facing, but more importantly, what we can do to help them. It was awesome to hear the many different things, and if I had to pick 3 words that stood out to me, it would be education, action, and policy. I look forward to going back to my state and local Farm Bureau and looking at ways we can get our Farm Bureau members on these committees, on these boards, to really push for that policy that protects our agriculturalists, and most importantly, promote education, educating our consumers on how to reach their customers, as well as educating people on why agriculture should matter to them. By coming together and implementing all of these strategies, I hope that in 15, 20 years, I can drive by and still see that Wynn Ranch sign on the side of the road.
Wow, what a conversation. We can all sit here today and successfully say that growth is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be scary. Today we discussed how Farm Bureau can play a role in ensuring that responsible growth happens and protecting agriculture and the agrarian way of life, from promoting policy all the way to having workshops in our own local towns to get our townspeople on our local zoning committees to protect the agrarian way of life, not only locally, but statewide and nationwide.
Today's discussion surfaced a number of ideas to address this timely policy issue. The contestants are now encouraged to engage in Farm Bureau grassroots policy development process to build upon the work of today's discussion. Let's show these competitors our appreciation for a job well done. At this time, I will return control of this competition to your room chair, Cora.
Thank you, Rachel Duncan, for a well-run competition. The judges for today's competition are Lauren King, Dan Glessing, Joe Mateo, Linda Pryor, and Nicole Devon. Now I ask the judges to report with me to the tabulation room.
Thank you to our judges and timekeeper. We appreciate your help today. We would now like each competitor to make a brief statement about themselves, their Farm Bureau experience, and the connection to agriculture in a voluntary order.
I can go first. Hi guys, my name is Courtney Tavey. I am currently a sophomore attending Cornell University. I study animal science on a pre-vet track. My really love for agriculture and agricultural policy, I think, was rooted in my FFA experience. From 6th grade, I was involved and just loved being able to advocate for an industry that I'm so truly passionate about. And from then on, I continued to grow in my role in FFA and served as a state officer. That sort of pathway and love for agriculture really is where I found my passion for large animal, food animal medicine, and that's what I'm sort of guiding my way to study in Cornell. From there, at Cornell University, I really got involved in my collegiate Farm Bureau and loved having the opportunity to continue to develop my skills as someone who's passionate about advocating for the agricultural industry on my local, state, and national level.
I can go next. I am Sarah Bear. I am from Nephi, Utah, and so I grew up on just a small cattle farm. We had about 40 head of cattle, and then we grow some of our own hay. But I have loved growing up in the ag industry beyond my personal family farm, which is on the smaller side. I have had the opportunity to be involved with my grandparents and my in-laws' farms, which are all very diverse, and I can honestly say that I love pretty much every aspect of agriculture. I'm currently studying agricultural education at Utah State University, and how I got my start in Farm Bureau was actually also an FFA. When I was in high school, our state sponsors an FFA discussion meet, and my advisor signed me up without telling me, and so turns out I actually really liked discussion meet, and that kind of sparked an interest. And then when I got to Utah State, I got involved in our Collegiate chapter. I realized how passionate I am about ag policy and advocating, making sure the voice of agriculturalists is heard. And so I'm very grateful to this organization and to the ag industry for just the awesome values I've been able to learn, and then all the awesome people I've got to meet. These ladies are fantastic. So, yeah.
I guess I'll go next. Hi everyone, my name is Brooke Beamisterfer. I'm from Lebanon County, Pennsylvania, and I'm currently a junior studying agribusiness management at Penn State. As far as my ag background, I grew up on my family's farm where we primarily grow poultry, but we also have some direct-to-consumer grass-fed beef and row crops, and that really just sustained a lot of my values and passion for the ag industry. Growing up, I was involved in 4-H. I showed market goats, and then I was also, like y'all, very involved in FFA. And that really sustained my further passion in leadership and advocacy. I did a lot of public speaking, and that just kind of flourished into extra involvement with my county fair. I worked there, and then I served as the state alternate fair queen, which also let me dip my toes into a lot of policy things, which I've found a love for. So that just naturally kind of flowed to me getting involved in Collegiate Farm Bureau at Penn State University, and that's just been a great opportunity to learn more about what I can do to positively impact rural communities and farmers, as it's something that's truly near and dear to my heart. So it's been a blessing to be here. I certainly learned a lot. Y'all did great. Met a lot of new people, and I just want to say thanks.
My name is Tori Reed. I am from Ellijay, Georgia, which is a small town in northern Georgia. My start in agriculture, similar to everyone up here, it seems like, started with showing livestock. I showed goats and then transitioned into dairy cattle. I was also actively involved in my FFA chapter and competed on both the local, state, and national level in public speaking along with dairy cattle judging. So that kind of led me into Georgia Farm Bureau and Young Farmers and Ranchers, specifically with the discussion meet. I was fortunate to win the discussion meet last year in Georgia as well, just didn't get to compete at the nationals. But I am in college. I'm a senior in education, and I'm a current kindergarten teacher while I'm finishing my senior year. So that is really a blessing. And it's opened my eyes to see the lack of education and the lack of connection from our farms, even in our rural communities. But this has been an amazing experience.
Thank you, competitors, for a great final round of the 2026 Collegiate Discussion Meet competition event. The winner of this event will be announced during the YF&R celebration and awards reception later this evening. Thank you once again to our competitive event sponsor, CHS Foundation, who has made it possible to award more than $18,000 in scholarships to Collegiate Discussion Meet competitors. Please join me in a round of applause to show our appreciation to an outstanding sponsor. We appreciate your support of the YF&R program and hope you will attend the YF&R celebration and awards reception, where we will announce the winner of the discussion meet. The celebration will be held in excuse me, I'm tongue-tied, in Exhibit Hall A here in the Oregon Convention Center, beginning at 5:30 p.m. There will be reserved seating for the final 4 Collegiate Discussion Meet competitors. Thank you once again.